All right, so a Trysteropod cold open. For this episode, Dorian and I decided to do an interview with a friend of his named Maggie Cox, and we were recording on Zoom. And after half an hour, my computer locked up, and all I heard was Dorian going rather than saying the thing he was saying. So luckily, Dorian decided to record on his computer, and so what you'll get is me making a stupid comment about Roger Scruton and Terry Eagleton, and then immediately Dorian and Maggie talking about something completely different. I do manage to rejoin the conversation before the end of the episode. So, I hope you enjoy. Here's the music. You're listening to Trysteropod episode 19. It's a podcast by two composers, David Kulma, that's me, and Dorian Wallace, the other guy. And we're leftists and composers, and we talk about music and politics and whatever the hell Dorian wants to talk about most of the time. So, Dorian, what's going on?
Word. So today I just thought it would be cool to bring on a friend and colleague, Maggie Cox, and Maggie is someone we met in the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers, but in the Classical Music Accountability Committee, which started off as, just a space, sort of a philosophical space to talk about issues within our field of concert music, I guess. But it's turning into more of an activist space, and it's, at first I wasn't certain where the politics were, and there's some pretty blatant Marxist and anarchist and communist in the group, and it's great. And so yeah, I wanted to just invite Maggie on because you've always got some really badass shit, and just wanted to talk to you. So tell us about yourself.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm a bassist right now. I'm from Northeast Ohio, so I was really excited to find out that you guys both went to Kent. I didn't know that until like 10 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes don't know that until 10 minutes ago either. Anyway, go ahead.
It's so rare to meet people from Ohio, like in the music world, especially from Kent. So Kent's literally like 15 minutes from where I live, so that's so cool. I'm from Northeast Ohio. I did my undergrad at Rice. I finished in 2020, and now I'm in my first year of a post-bac diploma at Curtis. But we're doing everything remote this year, so I've just been living at home. And yeah, I guess outside of music, I don't know. I've really enjoyed working with Yuma over the past couple weeks, months. It's always, I think it was really refreshing to hear like Dorian, your description of Yuma, because sometimes I'm like not even really sure what it is. So hearing that it like started as a philosophical place and is now turning into an activist space with pretty belligerently leftist politics is like very validating to hear, because it's like, okay, my understanding of the group was correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, that's me, I guess.
Well, it's always so terrifying to go into new spaces in this world, because it's oftentimes very, very liberal, like very there's just not I'll give a very good example. I used to work at Interlaken, and we were talking about the awful pay. Everyone was sitting around the campfire talking about how bad the pay was.
Pay is really bad.
And literally the conversation came up, and it was like, well, we should like do something. Like we should like work on this. And everyone was like, oh, I don't really want to ruffle feathers, and I want to get that ass back next year. And it just, it was like you all you all were just like, we were all on the same page that like the pay is garbage, and these kids are coming here and paying unreal amounts of money to get in and into this program, and where is the money going? It's not going to the faculty. It's not going to the staff. So yeah, so it Yuma was very very nice to actually start to hear people begin talking, especially. I'd like to have another person on down the line, David, but especially like Clara. She just has some really, like, it was kind of her speaking about her political beliefs, and it was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm not the most radical person here in the room. Like, yeah, this is great.
I think it's also great because you have, like, for me, it's really encouraging to be one of the younger people in the group and not be the most radical, and to see like people 10 or 15 years older that have been doing this work for a lot longer than I have, and people like John and you and Clara who like have read more theory and have more practice organizing, people like Jay who have like started their own organizations. Like, it really feels like everyone is bringing something so unique, like from their own knowledge and lived experience, that it's like really feels like a really open and collaborative space.
Yeah. So the real I think the really specific reason I was interested in having you on just to chat is you have a student's perspective, something that I don't really remember. David, you're a student, but you're in a different era, I guess.
I just Dorian, I think in the end you probably just don't remember much of school. That'd be my guess, but but no, this is true. I'm just a joke.
I was high a lot, Maggie. Like
he was high a lot.
A lot. Yeah, but
no,
anyways,
but Dorian and I have been professionals for about a decade, so it's we haven't really we don't know what it's like to be 20 in our early 20s anymore, or mid 20s anymore. It's a different section of our lives, and the people that I'm teaching as they're undergraduate college students. They have very different ideas about the world than I do sometimes, and so sometimes it's helpful to get a different perspective than mine.
Yeah. So what is the state of classical music from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to try to speak for all music students, because I definitely don't think I would be the person to do that. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like my experience, because of some things that have happened in my personal life, I've never been able to separate like my personal and political views from my like professional and musical life, which I think is something that in music school is usually, I feel like there's usually that happens very early on, I think, which is people, because you talk about like your colleagues at Interlochen, where I think oftentimes in like music spaces, there's this overarching belief that like as musicians, like we can't do anything, and we can't actually take action, because I think that starts really early on. Like you think about students, and like my experience has always been with students at music schools and conservatories and even at summer festivals, there's this feeling of, most of the time, I think music students are dissatisfied with their institutions, and they can name pretty specific qualms that they have with where they're attending, but music students feel like they can't do anything because they'll be blacklisted, or because they'll get their funding cut, or they, the screen will get taken down at the end of an audition and they won't get the job. And so there's this feeling that when you're a student, it's like, okay, I'm not happy with the status quo, but I can't do anything until I get a job in 10 years or whatever. And then you get a job, and this is my perspective, is you get a job and then you say like, well, not happy with how things were at my institution, and I'm not happy with how things are at my current institution, but I can't say anything because I need tenure. And then it's, I can't say anything because I want a better job, or because I'm going to be with this section for the next 50 years and I don't want to burn a bridge, or I want to be with this orchestra for the rest of my life. I don't want to burn a bridge. And then that continues. So you have this really like, it continues, that like kind of feeling of powerlessness, because I think of fear of insecurity or just being uncomfortable continues. So you have people even at the very top of this field saying, I can't do anything because it's like, it's almost like a glorified bro code that applies to all musicians. Like, I can't do anything because I don't want to burn a bridge. So you have people like the very top of this field saying like, well, I wish I could do something. And I think that's because that's something we learn when we're really young, that like, we don't have any power to actually change things. So, I mean, I've just felt since I was really young that if I said, well, like, I'll speak up later, I had a feeling that if I said I'll speak up later, then I probably never would. So I've tried to just get in the practice of speaking up when things aren't right. And that's been really like enlightening almost, because you find out how like deeply entrenched these problems are. You know, like when you do speak out, it's never a quick fix. It's almost like, for me, it's been even more upsetting because you find out how much you have to push against.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I have a question. Could you elaborate a little bit more specifically on some of the issues? Because right now we're speaking broadly, and keep in mind, like totally on the same page. But I'm curious, just very specifically, like what are some specific circumstances that
what's wrong with it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, in my personal experience, the thing that I think initially like got my antennas up and kind of made me be like, wow, this whole world is really, this whole classical music industry is like really fucked, is just the issue of like how far individuals and institutions will go to protect abusers in classical music. Like, that for me has been the thing that is like, oh my fucking God, our institution is built on the premise that we must protect these corrupt individuals, because it feels like there's this belief that like, well, they're talented individuals and we need them. Unfortunately, even though they're rapists and abusers, we need them because they're excellent musicians. Or there's this belief that like, oh, well, that's just the way it is, and like, he's never going to change. And I think every single classical musician or working musician, performing musician could name dozens of people who should not be employed and in classical music, and people who in other places of work, like places with stronger unions, places where these people would not be employed because there would just be a zero tolerance policy. Like, for example, my first like real experience with this was at Rice. I had an abuser in my studio, another bassist, and it was, you know, it's a very small studio, and it was someone that I had to see every day. And it was giving me like, you know, I was experiencing a lot of trauma and really extreme emotional reactions at school. And thankfully I had some women in my life who had experienced, you know, of course, had experienced the exact same thing with having abusers in their studio. And so I had people who would literally walk through that same thing and were able to say like, go to Title IX. So thankfully, I was pointed in that direction. I went to the Title IX office at Rice and got confirmation that yes, this was an abusive situation. Yes, this was preventing me from learning fully, and that it was unsafe. And after talking with Title IX, even though I was validated in my experience, I was told like, well, there's still nothing you can do because this person is in all your classes. Like, we can't, you know, there's only one bass department, so we can't do anything about this. You will have to continue to see them every day. The only thing we can do is say, we can send a request from Rice Title IX to the music school that says you will not have to sit next to this person in orchestra. And so,
problem solved.
yeah. And so, but at the time it was like, I had requested to be out of orchestra for the rest of the semester, which is like, you know, really heartbreaking because that's what you're at school to do. But that to me was the only solution. So hearing like, okay, you don't have to sit next to him and we'll try to keep you two as far apart, we can request that. That was like, to me, it felt like a huge victory at the time, which I think is another example of like how broken the institution is, that felt like, oh, I'm being protected. My institution is protecting me. But
right, I get 6 feet of distance from this one person. I'm
yeah.
How low is the bar?
And I was so thankful. I was like, oh my God, like they're working, like it's working. They're protecting me. But after the Title IX request was sent to the music school, I found out that the faculty that I worked with didn't know what Title IX was. So because I don't know if it's likely because of the Title IX training at the university, but I think there's also this, you know, most musicians, I think it's a symptomatic of a broader problem that like musicians in universities don't play by the same rules as the other teachers. Like other teachers at Rice, I'm sure knew what Title IX was, but the faculty at the music school didn't. So that request was meaningless. And I had to explain to faculty, I had to try to teach them what Title IX was. I had to like essentially beg them to take it seriously because I saw them understand it and then regurgitate it as like, oh, she had a bad breakup. And, you know, so it was meaningless. And I got pulled aside in school in front of my colleagues by the music director and was told, you know, patted on the back and said like, thank you for doing this. Nothing changed. And then the next orchestra cycle, I was assigned to sit next to that person. And not on the same music stand. So I guess they had interpreted it as you don't have to be on the same stand, you don't have to turn his pages, but I had to sit next to him for a 5-week cycle. So that to me was really like the first experience where it was like, wow, there are so many layers of wrong and so many layers of corrupt. And then when I went to Title IX and told them my experience of this didn't work because they don't know what Title IX is, I was asked to design, as a 20-year-old, I was asked to design a Title IX presentation specifically for the music faculty and was told that in a couple months I could present that to the music faculty at Rice if I wanted.
What? It isn't the job of Title IX to sit and do that presentation?
Well, they said, clearly we need a music student's perspective, so you can design it and you can help us present it. And at the time, I was so confused and lost and upset that I was like, okay, like I'll start working on it. And then after telling like a couple of friends, they were like, Maggie, like, no, like no, that's not appropriate. But it was like, you're going to get blacklisted, you know, if you stand up in front of the school and say that. So there was never a resolution with any of that.
There are so many levels, like it's like, number one, like, I can't believe they put that responsibility on you. But then number two, taking that responsibility is putting a target on your back. Like, it's just, it's so, like, there are so many. Oh,
so would you like to hear a Title IX story about Kent State University, as best I know it?
Yeah, I have a Title IX story about Kent State University.
The guy who was the band director after Dorian and I were there, so the wonderful band director that was at the school while we were students, retired, and the first long-term full-time guy who replaced him, he was inappropriate with female students and faculty and all sorts of things in really bad, disgusting ways, apparently.
Actually, my sister went to CrossFit with that guy.
Oh, wow.
She actually was on the receiving end of some of the abuse via Snapchat.
Exactly. So he was doing this kind of
Yeah.
shit with his own students. And so people went to Title IX.
Mm-hmm.
And so then Title IX did an investigation, the Kent State's Title IX department. And they collected all this information about how terrible he was. And then they sent him and his lawyer a list of all of their names and what they said about him.
God.
And so guess what? It meant that he was on social media and he was like putting photos of like people with knives and like people's initials on it about like, you know, wanting to go after these people, right? So Title IX outed everybody who complained about him.
Oh my God.
So anyway, guess what? So they put him on leave,
Mhm.
and while all of the everything was, they were moving through the process or whatever, and he ended up getting fired because he kept on being he was still being inappropriate, sending inappropriate texts and calling people afterward. And then they went to the office and they went to the faculty or the office and said, no, this is happening. And they're like, oh, he's not supposed to be in contact with anybody. So they fired him for cause. So
Oh God.
Title IX didn't really work.
Yeah.
Well, it just, again, the role of that organization in a university is not to protect students or the people making the complaints. It's to protect the university from the lawsuits that might come around because of these kind of laws that are required, that have been instituted at the federal level.
Yeah. I think that's the takeaway from a lot of these experiences is like music students and music workers don't really have protections. You know, even if we figure out how to navigate like the mazes of Title IX and HR and try to use anything legal to our advantage, there are no real protections in place. And like we've seen this in plenty of like professional orchestras, you know, like the New York Phil and all the stuff with the BSO, where people go forward and say like, you know, there's an orchestra member who is a rapist or who sexually assaulted someone, and they do an internal investigation and find out that like, oh yeah, they did it, but you know, they still have tenure, you know. So I think that's a really disheartening thing, is it's not, even if you do everything you can, the systems are still set up to protect institutions and to protect abusers. No.
Well, so I should note at this point, I jumped right into a different story just to kind of confirm the things you were talking about. But yeah, that thing that's happened to you, that sounds terrible. I'm so sorry. Thank you for telling us about that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that was definitely the most, like, me, the most blatant experience I've had of like understanding who these systems are designed to protect.
Right.
But like as a woman in the bass community, there's kind of been constant reminders of that, of like, you know, teachers at summer festivals saying things that were abhorrent, but like the feeling of like, well, I can't do anything. Like I had teachers at a really prestigious summer festival, bass faculty, say that they couldn't respect me because of the way that I dressed. And stuff like that happens. Like, that's just an example to me of like,
what does that even mean? I mean, like legitimately, it's one of those bizarre things about the patriarchy in and of itself, is like the second you start to actually ask like more digging questions, it's like so you don't like that she's a she, like that's what it is. Like it's like it has nothing to do with the fucking clothes, you fucking pig. Like,
yeah,
you know,
it's like our society has named white cis male able-bodied men as not fat, able-bodied men. We have named that as normal and the ideal worker, and anyone who deviates from that is considered offensive in professional worlds. And I think music is just one of like the more belligerent fields when it comes to discriminating people just because they deviate from that norm. But it's like, yeah, if you are outwardly different or deviant from what is considered normal, then you are offensive. And I think we see that in music in a lot of different ways, you know. But it's exactly what you said. It's like when you start asking, you know, what does that mean, or like why, and it's like, oh, it's just because I'm not a man. And like, yeah, if you start digging, it's like it doesn't hold water at all.
David, are you familiar with the Future Symphony Institute?
I'm not.
Yeah. So this is something that's been coming up in our dialogues in the group that Maggie and I am in. This is basically it's basically a white nationalist classical music organization run by is it the principal trumpet player from BSO?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, it's very much put in that sort of Richard Spencer style of we're just talking about culture and ideas, but the more you dig into it, it's very blatantly white male identitarian, and it gets really weird when, like, there was one article that a mutual friend had shared, just he was like, you got to read this, where there was a line that was very quietly praising Nazi Germany, and very like it was doing that whole like look at the totalitarian states and how horrible they were, and music brought people together, but it's very blatantly critical of the USSR, as it should be, but then it's not critical about the great society in Germany during 1941 or what, you know, whatever year. It says all this stuff that it's like, motherfucker, that was Nazi Germany. But this is a website that is new discovery, but it is so blatant that just even the fear of having women in orchestras in orchestral spaces, or having any POC in orchestral spaces, is such a threat that there's an organization that has formed that is basically instilling, in air quotes, Western values as a mask to say we don't want you here. It's gross. It's fucking really gross.
The website has philosophy papers on it.
Yep.
Philosophy articles on it.
Just read through the titles. There's some really special ones.
Well, there's the most recent one is the conservatism and the conservatory. There's one name that there's a name of a philosopher that writes about music sometimes that I've never heard anyone say nice things about him. In the places I'm around, and it's this guy, Roger Scruton. Never heard anything nice said about this man. I watched it a long time ago. I watched a debate between him and Terry Eagleton. I was like, hey, Terry Eagleton, that's interesting. You know, it's like, who's this other fuck?
Well, so apparently we lost David, so I'm hitting record on my end. All good. Yeah, so I guess while we wait for David to jump back on a non-political statement, how do you get involved in music? Like, what drew you to it? Because, I'm always interested in people's stories.
Yeah. I mean, my mom had me start doing piano lessons when I was little. Like, my parents aren't musicians, but they both love music. Like, my mom was always in choirs, and my dad loves going to concerts. So I was in like kinder music when I was really little, and then started piano lessons. And then in 4th grade, we had like string instrument day and music class. And everyone got to try one instrument, and I remember thinking like it would be really funny if I tried the bass. Like I thought all my friends would get a kick out of it, and everyone wanted to try the violins. Like the line for bass was by far the shortest. And I think I was just like a bored kid. And it just like started
What do
as
you
a
mean
joke.
by it would have been funny? I'm just curious. Like
Like
because
I
of
was
your
like,
size, or
yeah, I mean, it was just like I was just like wanted to get a laugh from my friends, and I was like, oh, like all these guys. Like I remember just like think all my friends when I try violin. I was like, oh my god, like they're gonna think this is so hilarious if I decide to try the bass. Like really elite humor, but so I ended up trying it and was like, oh, this is fun. You know, I remember like liking it, and um, a lot of my friends were in orchestra, so um, I don't know. It started as like a very casual thing, you know, and then just it was. I remember being. I thought it was really cool that like there seemed to be such a direct like correlation between just like how much time. I remember just like in fourth grade being like, oh, if I practice, like I'll get better, you know, and realizing like, oh, you can learn more songs, and it was just that was very exciting as like an 11-year-old. Oh, David's back.
yeah. Hey, David. Yeah. So, did you know you were gonna be a lifelong bass player when you were 11?
I think yeah, when I was in fourth and fifth grade, like it was very. I didn't overthink it that much. I was just like, oh, I like doing this. And then we had to, for music class, do like a little report on how to have a career in music, or like what would you want to do. And I remember doing a report on like I wanted to play Broadway musicals because I really liked musicals at the time. And it was just like, I think because of that project, it was like presented as an option. It was like, oh, if you want to do this, like this is a career for people. And I was really lucky to have like my parents and teachers what? who were always really encouraging and supportive. Like I didn't have a lot of naysayers when I was young, and my parents encouraged me. So I got very lucky. I'm really thankful.
Yeah, and then are you? I know this is like a very broad question, just because there are so many facets. You know, it's like, what's your favorite part of music? It's like, all of it.
Yeah.
But you know, are you more drawn towards orchestral playing, or chamber playing, or solo playing, or improvising, or
Um,
I guess more. What are you drawn towards?
yeah, I mean, I love playing chamber music and playing in an orchestra. Like I think I love playing with other people and just like the feeling of being in a group. I think that's like very addicting to to be a part of that.
Yeah, totally.
And I think with like bass, it's interesting because I think with bass, it's like you're just presented as like the way to have a career in bass is to get an orchestra job. Like it's never presented as an option to be like a chamber musician or a soloist. Like I think there's just one path. So this past year has actually been really interesting because now that you know there hasn't been any auditions and there's been so much more time just to like do projects, I've realized like you know I like playing in orchestra and like playing chamber music, but I've done a lot of stuff with living composers over the past year. And yeah, and I love that. Like I mean, I think I like what I like the music most about music is just like working with people, and to me there's something really like exciting and gratifying of like playing someone's music for them. You know, like I don't really have an interest in composing, but
Hmm.
I love being like, okay, I can play bass. So if you are a composer and you need someone to play your bass piece, like I would love to do that. That's just like I think that's just like such a joy to like be able to bring someone else's music like to life. It sounds
Yeah.
so corny, but like that was such like a meaningful experience, like almost to the point where like I didn't really care like what the music sounded like. It was
Hmm.
like I know this means something to like the person who wrote it. So that was like what, because that was the priority. It made the whole thing just like so exciting and meaningful. And it feels like a lot more like, I think contemporary music feels like a more open and equitable place because you're not dealing with so many centuries of like the way things should be and like tradition, and it doesn't feel as hierarchical, you know. So that is, I really appreciate that because it sometimes it feels like orchestras are so like stifling and almost like violent, you know, like there's just so much, there's so many bad politics like embedded in orchestras, and that over the past year I've kind of realized like I don't know if I want to do this, like I don't know if I want to play in an orchestra for decades and decades, like it kind of sounds miserable, you know.
Yeah.
Going on with David also.
Yeah, we lost David. That's okay. Are there any like which composers have you been working with, or have you gotten to work with?
Yeah, so this fall I did probably like my favorite project ever. A friend of mine that I met last summer asked me to put together a recital of works for solo bass, but they all had to be written by women. It was
Mm.
for her group, Illuminate Women's Music.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like from the beginning when I was like even told that idea, I like was so excited. And it was like, this is gonna be this whole project like is going to be such like a joy and such a privilege just because of the basis of like this is I like believe in this mission and this idea. And
Mm-hmm.
so I ended up, the really cool part was I played 6 pieces and 5 of them had been written in 2020. So 2 pieces were by the composer Angela Slater. One was by Anya Vu, and two were commissioned by this new group, Bass Players for Black Composers, which is doing really amazing work. And those pieces were by Sarian Sanko and Mason Vines,
Mm-hmm.
who are incredible. And then there was another piece written in the 90s by the bassist Sonia Ray, who's in
Mm.
Brazil. And they were so like, every single one of the composers was like so generous with their time, and the whole process felt so collaborative, and like there was so much I felt mutual respect and just like understanding and compassion. um and so going back and forth with them for like weeks to months, and then presenting the project, and each of the composers recorded like an introduction video of them describing what had motivated their piece.
Mm-hmm.
Arian's piece especially was very like socially conscious, like describing specifically the events of last summer, and how the title was Everything Feels the Same, and it was a play on how everything during the pandemic has felt so monotonous, and also how the uprisings from last summer, although they felt really new and revolutionary and exciting, felt very similar to uprisings that have occurred in the past with very little change. So like playing pieces that have been written with so much like purpose and depth, and written by such amazing women, like that was like such an honor. It was so exciting.
Wow. Yeah, there's just something about the relationship of working with a composer and working with a performer and having just the dialogue of it's like, well, what do you want? like what's something
Yeah.
that's important for you? And yeah, so my wife is in a duo called Shepherdess, violin and voice, and
Oh, cool.
they have a mission that it's awkward. Like, there's been some discussion about exploitation and all of that, but the mission is generally performing music of marginalized voices.
Hmm.
But just hearing them discuss it, it's there can be an exploitation thing, but there's also, you need money and you need grants. Like, I did a project in 2019. It was with a black woman. She had written the text and she was the main performer, and it was so awkward because the mission, the piece, it was a retelling of Peter and the Wolf from the wolf's perspective. That was it. It was like, like that was the gist of it. It was this woman. It was her idea. Like, she had been thinking about it for a long time, and we had 3 composers each write a movement. Evan Williams, Lainey Pfefferman, and myself. And it was just so bizarre, like having to, for grants, having to put the identity of Kyra, the author.
Yeah.
Because it was like I mean, it's obviously in there, but it just felt very weirdly gross that it was like, in order to get money we have to talk about something that's not even mentioned in the piece. Like obviously her identity is going to come through her art, and it's going to, all of those things, but it was just so, it felt very exploitation but I mean, it, that's neoliberalism is, it's like taking identity politics in the wrong, without looking at the actual substance of the hierarchical structures. It's just about filling the gap, and that's it. Hey, David. Welcome back.
I managed to return after 10 minutes of garbage. How's everybody going?
Good. We were talking about Maggie's work with contemporary composers and a solo bass concert you did of all women composers during the pandemic.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So you were mentioning bass players for black composers. Do you know Nick Dunstan?
I was just talking to someone about Nick yesterday. I love Nick.
Yes.
How do you know Nick?
Well, he was the bass player in my composition that premiered over the pandemic. But we've had him on our podcast before. And he's also my group 10th Intervention. We're in the middle of a grant cycle to present one of his pieces about, I mean, this is super dark, but it's about basically forced sterilization surgeries that were done in Puerto Rico, and he wrote a piece addressing it. It's for 2 bass players, 2 drummers, 2 horn players, and female vocalist. So yeah, we know Nick really well.
He's amazing. He's like my friend from high school. Went to senior school with him, and in college I did some like benefit concerts at Ohio, and Nick ended up playing on them with like a friend of a friend's quartet. And
Lucas?
Yeah. I went to high school with Lucas.
So, just to ask it, do you know Bobby Salvaggio?
Yeah, I do know Bobby Silva. Bobby also played on one of my benefit concerts.
That's my brother-in-law.
Oh my god. I love Bobby. I think he's amazing.
Yeah, he's yeah, the world is shrinking more and more.
We know Bobby well.
Yeah, I've known
Bobby
wiped my butt when I was like 3 years old, and
also most recently when he was about 24.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, like, Bobby just cleaned my butt like a couple minutes ago before getting on the podcast.
Oh my god, that is...
Wow. Well, it's like,
crazy.
We're all from Northeast Ohio, so there has to be crossover.
I know, now I'm just like thinking of names. I'm like, stop.
You know Chris Coles? Do you know
what?
Chris Coles? Saxophone player?
No.
No. Theron Brown?
I don't know if that's like friend of a friend. I know the name really well.
Mm-hmm.
You know Roberto Iriarte?
Yes.
He was my middle school and high school orchestra teacher.
Oh my god. Oh my god. This is so ridiculous. Wow. Well, cool.
Yeah.
So we are at our final couple moments, and this one was a little bit shorter than, other times. But if you'd ever like to come back on, and maybe we can get into more specific topics, just about the field and labor issues. But even it's there's this really cool book I'm reading it right now called Militant Joy, and it's about like the positive sides of organizing, and it really is one of those elements where we talk about all the horrendous things that go on, but the fact that we are in the music industry, it's like so do you like music? And it's like, oh god, yes. I love music. I don't want to speak for the individual, but I'll just say that there's a very hardcore activist that we know who the conversation came up about the Nutcracker, and they admitted that that's one of their all-time favorite pieces. Just it was yeah, I know we trash on all this stuff, but I really love the Nutcracker. and in response it was yeah, I love Rachmaninoff a lot.
It's embarrassing. It's not to be soft, but love music.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's so funny.
But before we close out, is there any way people can get in touch with you, check you out on social media, or check out any projects you're working on, or any of that?
Yeah, so I think probably the best way to get in touch with me is Facebook. I try to put all of my projects out there, even though it's obviously Facebook is gross, but I think that's the best way right now to reach me. It's Maggie Cox. My email is cox.marguerite97@gmail. I just made a LinkedIn profile.
all the internet's best.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to check the boxes,
Yeah. It's my TikTok, my Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried TikTok and it was really horrible. Really the ugliest side of the internet, I think.
Wow.
There are so many ugly sides.
Yeah. Not to make it a competition, but there are some dark places that we'll have to talk about. Yeah, I have a Parler account, just to keep tabs in that world, and it is it's dark. It's a dark place.
I just started watching the documentary about Pepe the Frog meme. I don't remember if it's called Feels Good Man or Feels Bad Man, but that is fucking crazy. I was never on 4chan, but they show a lot of 4chan stuff, and it's oh my god. That's fucking cool.
Go straight to 64chan. You'll skip over a few things. I don't even know if 64chan exists. They're just double the number, and you'll get to the farther right thing.
Yeah. Well,
you'll find you'll figure out where all the incels hang out.
Yeah.
Some of them are at the top of professional orchestras, apparently.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, and on that note,
that's a great place to stop. Yeah.
David, did you have anything before we close out?
No, I'm sorry. I don't have anything. No.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening to Trysteropod. We may or may not be regular or not. Who the fuck knows? Fuck everything.
That's what Metamucil's for.
Yeah. But thank you, Maggie, for coming and joining us.
Thank you.
And we'd love to chat with you some more down the road. And fuck the system and burn it down. And yeah, cool, awesome. Rock and roll. Catch y'all later. Bye.